At his peak, he was worth $6.6 billion. He owned a clothing empire, a record label, and the most talked-about mind in music. 3 years later, gone. Not slowly, not gradually. Most people think it takes years to lose everything. For these artists, it took a single decision, a single night, a single word they couldn't take back. This is the story of famous artists ruined by the one thing they couldn't control themselves. Buckle in, this one doesn't have a happy ending. In 2015, Kanye West wasn't just a rapper. He was a cultural operating system. Everything ran through him: music, fashion, conversation, controversy. Forbes called him a billionaire. His Yeezy deal with Adidas alone was generating over $1.5 billion annually. He had transcended music entirely. He was an idea. But here's the psychology nobody talks about. When a person is told they're a genius for long enough, they stop questioning themselves. Every instinct feels prophetic. Every thought feels like scripture. Kanye had built an identity so inflated, so total, that there was no mechanism left for self-correction. The warning signs were there. The downfall of Kanye West didn't begin in 2022. It began years earlier, in the gap between what he believed about himself and what was actually true. The exact moment. The fallout was seismic and almost instantaneous. A fashion show in Paris. One shirt, two words. On October 3, 2022, Balenciaga cut ties. Gap had already walked, but now Adidas started sweating. Then came the October podcast appearances. The anti-Semitic remarks. Statements so extreme that even his most loyal defenders went quiet. Within weeks, not months, Adidas terminated the partnership. Overnight, Forbes estimated he lost everything that made him a billionaire. $1.5 billion evaporated. He fell off the billionaires list entirely. But what the public didn't know was even darker. The internal Adidas debate had been going on for months. Executives knew. Partners knew. There had been meetings, interventions of sorts, quiet conversations. Nobody pulled the trigger until it became undeniable. Which means the exact moment of collapse wasn't the shirt or the podcast. It was the moment the people around him chose silence over accountability. And he had curated that silence himself. Career-destroying moments rarely arrive unannounced. They build. They compound. And by the time the public sees them, the private destruction has already been happening for years. From one of the most celebrated artists in history, to a disgraced star dropped by every major corporate partner he had. The downfall of Kanye West isn't a story about anti-Semitism alone. It's a story about what happens when genius and accountability become mutually exclusive, and everyone around you is too afraid or too paid to tell you the truth. From riches to rags, not just financially, culturally, socially, reputationally. The money might come back, the credibility, that's a different conversation. For 3 decades, Sean Combs didn't just survive the music industry, he ruled it. Bad Boy Records, Revolt TV, Ciroc Vodka, a clothing line, a net worth that peaked near $1 billion. He threw the parties everyone wanted to be at. He was photographed with presidents, A-listers, and heads of state. He was, by every external measure, untouchable. And that word, untouchable, is exactly where this story gets dark. November 16, 2023. Cassie Ventura, his former partner of over a decade, filed a lawsuit alleging years of physical abuse, sexual assault, and what the lawsuit described as a pattern of coercion and control. Diddy's team settled the suit the very next day. Now, in legal terms, settling isn't an admission of guilt. But in the court of public opinion, settling within 24 hours of a filing that detailed years of alleged abuse with that level of specificity. The psychology here is critical to understand. People who are truly innocent of detailed, specific allegations fight, publicly, loudly, because their reputation is the thing at stake. A 24-hour settlement doesn't just make the lawsuit go away, it makes the question louder. What else is there? And then the lawsuits multiplied. One became five, five became a dozen, each filing more detailed, more disturbing than the last. But what the public didn't know was even darker. In March 2024, federal agents raided his homes in Los Angeles and Miami simultaneously. Not one home, both at the same time. That's not a fishing expedition. That's a coordinated operation built on months, likely years, of federal surveillance and intelligence. The exact moment Sean Combs lost everything wasn't the Cassie lawsuit. It wasn't even the raids. It was September 16, 2024. Arrested at JFK Airport, charged with sex trafficking, racketeering, and transportation to engage in prostitution. The man who once represented aspirational black excellence in American business, arrested on federal charges that carry the kind of sentences that don't end with a comeback tour. The downfall of Sean Combs is a masterclass in what happens when power insulates someone from consequences for so long that they stop believing consequences exist. Every accusation was managed, every story was killed, every room was controlled. For 30 years. Famous artists ruined by their own mythology. Diddy spent decades constructing one so powerful, so ironclad, that he apparently came to believe it himself. And the people around him, artists, executives, celebrities photographed at his parties, many are now very publicly, very loudly, saying they knew nothing. Whether that's true is something courts will decide. What's undeniable? From riches to rags, from billion-dollar brand to federal defendant, Sean Combs represents one of the most catastrophic falls from grace in entertainment history. Career-destroying moments often have long shadows. This one stretched back decades. Some career-destroying moments aren't dramatic arrests or billion-dollar collapses. Some are slower, quieter, and somehow more tragic. Because Azealia Banks didn't lose a career. She torched one that almost every major label, every prominent producer, every serious critic agreed was going to be enormous. The talent was undeniable, the voice was undeniable, the pen, one of the sharpest in the game. So what happened? Here's the psychology. Azealia Banks was a young black woman from Harlem with a chip on her shoulder, the size of the industry that had been slow to embrace her. And some of that anger, completely justified. The music industry is brutal, it's racist, it's exploitative. She wasn't wrong about that. But there is a crucial difference between being right and being effective. And Azealia Banks chose, repeatedly, almost compulsively, rightness over effectiveness. The Twitter feuds became the story. The feuds became the brand. And a brand built on chaos can only hold public attention for so long before it stops being fascinating and starts being exhausting. The exact moment the industry consensus shifted, sometime around 2016, when the controversies began to genuinely overshadow the music in every single news cycle, labels stopped calling. Collaborators got quiet. From riches to rags isn't always about money. Sometimes it's about relevance, about a seat at the table that gets quietly removed while you're busy winning an argument online. Azealia Banks is a famous artist ruined, in part, by an industry that failed her, but also, critically, by an inability to separate the battles worth fighting from the ones that were slowly eating her career alive. The tragedy is, the music was always there, it still is. But almost nobody is listening. If you want to understand how famous artists ruined themselves while the entire industry watched and said nothing, R. Kelly is the case study that changes how you see the music business forever. Because this wasn't hidden. The allegations against Robert Sylvester Kelly dated back to the early 1990s, whispered, then reported, then documented on videotape. He was acquitted in 2008. And then the music kept playing. The psychology of R. Kelly's survival for so long in the industry is not about him. It's about everyone else. It's about what happens when an artist generates enough money that the people who could stop him choose not to look. Record labels kept signing checks, radio stations kept spinning records, collaborators kept showing up to sessions. Career-destroying moments can be resisted, not by the artist, but by an industry willing to look the other way. But what the public didn't know was even darker. The women speaking up had been speaking up for years. Their stories were documented, reported, and largely dismissed, often because they were young, often because they were black, and often because the machinery of R. Kelly's management was specifically designed to discredit them. Then came January 2019. 6 hours of documentary, real women, real accounts, named on camera. The cultural permission structure finally broke. Spotify pulled his music from playlists. RCA Records dropped him. Radio programmers stopped playing his catalog. And in 2021, convicted on all 9 counts of federal sex trafficking. Sentenced to 30 years. The downfall of R. Kelly is a story about an artist who destroyed dozens of lives over decades, and an industry that let him because the money was good. From riches to rags, from a 30-year sentence, the rags are a prison cell. And the most chilling part, this was the most documented story of the decade, and it still took 30 years. The artists who came before built their empires in a world where information moved slowly, where records could be buried, where a PR team and a good lawyer could hold back the tide. That world is gone. Today, career-destroying moments happen in real time and spread to 50 million people before the artist's publicist has finished their first cup of coffee. The speed of collapse has changed. What took R. Kelly 30 years to face, a 2025 artist would face in 30 days. Maybe 30 hours. The streaming era has created a new kind of accountability, imperfect, uneven, and still deeply flawed, but faster and louder than anything the industry has ever seen. The disgraced stars of tomorrow are making their decisions today. Decisions being filmed, screenshotted, and archived by a public that never forgets and never deletes. The phrase "from riches to rags" used to describe a journey of years. Now it can describe a weekend. And every artist climbing right now, every artist reading this from a tour bus or a label meeting, is one career-destroying moment away from this list. Here's what every single story in this video has in common. None of these artists woke up one morning and decided to destroy what they built. The downfall of a career is almost never a single catastrophic choice. It's a pattern, a tolerance for behavior that gets normalized, then protected, then weaponized. Is there an artist right now, still at their peak, still celebrated, who you think is one decision away from ending up on this list? Drop their name in the comments, tell us why. Because the next chapter is already being written. The question is, does it end differently?